it's an addiction. It's a problem. And I think this is way worse to a laptop, to an iPad, to a TV, because with a TV, you could still be with your family and you're still engaged together with this. Comparatively to this is very solo. It's very aggressive as far as not paying attention to anybody. And when somebody like me, who I have two kids, I get caught sometimes.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin, and
I'm Shane.
And today we are joined by my friend, Randy. So Randy is, well, he's the man, the myth, and the legend. He could write to capture your heart, to capture your business, to bring you money. He could do anything, honestly, as long as you give him a pen, a paper, and a blank slate. He's the guy to go to. Randy, thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. Excited to get into it.
Well, yeah, please tell the viewers, tell the listeners, who are you? What are you doing? What are you excited about? Give us a little bit of your current work and your mission.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Randy Ginsburg. I run a content marketing agency for B2B companies called Third Wall Creative. We help these B2B companies, mainly in the tech space, really build out their content strategy from across LinkedIn, across their email, across their blog and their case studies, and really build this cohesive engine so that you can, build awareness, you can maximize your social proof, and then you can also use that to, attract more opportunities for your business, whether that be leads, whether that be attracting better talent, investors, whatever that goal that you're optimizing for is. I've been running that for 3 years now, and it's been awesome getting to work with a really, diverse client base across a handful of different verticals. And then recently, as we were talking about, we got on, I started a company called Konzo, which is a digital wellness coaching and community service that helps high performers and founders build healthier relationships with their tech, with their digital habits, their phone, their computer, and the other screens that are in there.
What's really funny that I actually love about that is that if they get into one, it's almost the upsell into the other. Like, hey, you should be taking a break from your screen. And in doing that, let me write your content for you. or, hey, guess what? You hired me to write your content for you. Now you should take a break from your screen. Let me get you into this coaching program I have.
100%. I mean, it's also because I think a lot of founders, they recognize that content's important, but it might not be the highest leverage thing that they can do. They either don't like doing it or they don't want to spend the time doing it. And so just inherently, you're actually helping them pull some time away from whether that's, doom scrolling after they go post, spending time studying the different trends or what's performing well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of hidden overlap.
I definitely want to dive into this healthy relationship with tech and what does that really mean? But beforehand, as a business owner, content is very important, whether it's on an ad front or your website or a live blog. Regardless, if you want, everything's got to be maintained at the highest point. I'm assuming these objections come in, and I just want to know how you handle it. I'm sure our audience does too. Now that AI has taken over, specifically with ChatGPT and writing content here, what's the main differences? Is it really just understanding your clientele and their voice and, you able to get that message out clearly compared to just, a blanket statement? What have you found?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it in the sense that content itself is very much so a commodity. The barrier to going and creating that is lower than ever. And so then you need to think about, all right, what is that moat? And in my eyes, that moat is strategy. How can you go and use that content to build this cohesive engine? Because most of the time, someone's not just seeing one piece of content and then immediately pressing the buy button on your site or immediately saying, here, I'll hand you 10 grand. There's a whole journey that goes alongside it where different pieces of content play a very pivotal role. So I'll give you an example. You might think of, how can I create some piece of top of funnel content? And I'm going to use LinkedIn as that wide net where I'm going to reach a lot of business owners. So even within that, you want to break it out into different kind of strategic pieces of who you're trying to target. But let's say on one day, you're like, I'm going to give this broad business story, one of my business war stories from my decades of experience, then I want to use that to cast a really, really wide net and get as much engagement as possible. So you're going to do, one or two of those a week. Then you say, okay, well, now I have these people that are in my net, assuming that a decent chunk of them are within my ICP. What are their biggest pain points and objections? How can we go and create content around those pain points and objections so that one, our business is top of mind, but also I'm just viewed as this authority figure within my industry. And so you have people who then come to you as this source of education who may see that post and go and reach out, or they may just continue to view you as somewhere that they can go and learn. Then lastly, you have your bottom of funnel content, which is more of the case studies, the hiring announcements, the company announcements, stuff that's very specific to what you do that you're also going to layer in. So on LinkedIn specifically, you have all of that going out in a very cohesive manner. And that is what actually allows people to, one, see you every day and form that kind of top of mind connection to what you do and your brand. But then also when they do go and inevitably reach out through content at some point, whenever the time is right, they still might not be fully convinced, but they do have a much higher knowledge of what you do already. You know, what if they have an objection, you've probably already answered that within their content or within the content that you've posted. And then when they say, hey, I'm in the consideration phase, like, do you have any case studies? Then you hit them with like some of the other assets that you have on hand, whether that's those, you know, case study PDFs, the things you have on your site. You drive their initial interest from LinkedIn to a newsletter, and then you're repurposing that content there. Like, all of it kind of runs in this cohesive motion. And I think a lot of people approach content from the like, yeah, it's like a checkbox marketing, right? It's like, I know I need to post one piece of content a day, so I'm going to have ChatGPT blurt something out. I'm going to throw it on there and I'm done. And I think a lot of people are doing that and not seeing the results. And only after trying that do you realize that you really need that more kind of cohesive and thoughtful end.
I can tell that you've done this a few thousand times, especially diving in. I mean, you thought of everything from HR and updates to, you know, just the complete follow through on the social media platforms. I love the whole cycle. Are you niche specific? Because I imagine these content strategies that you're developing with these clients, they got to be all over the place, right? So something for crypto cannot be the same as a contractor or a construction worker or a plumber or, you know, blue white collars. So do you focus on strict industries and niches, or are you all encompassing, bring it on, let's see what comes out?
Yeah, when I initially started this 3 years ago, I was a freelancer. And so I naturally gravitated towards the few industries that I had the most expertise in. So ironically, crypto and blockchain was one of them, blockchain and AI, sports tech. I'm a huge sports fan. So that was one. And then I had previously come from like an e-commerce background. So e-commerce and retail tech were kind of the big three. That's still where a handful of our clients lie, but it's definitely expanded beyond those verticals. Interestingly enough, a lot of the principles of kind of what I just talked about from the strategy and the different types of assets that work and what people need are all very similar. Yes, there's nuances in terms of the content, the meat of the content, right? The information in there. And that's a lot of where you rely on interviews with, whether that's for case studies, you know, their external clients for that source material, whether you're doing internal interviews, whether that's with customer success, head of sales, the founder themselves, to kind of take their thoughts and simplify them down, condense them to whatever that content needs to be. But as far as building the actual strategy, there's a lot of similarities in terms of what works.
You know, here's a curious question for you. You mentioned something before that I thought was really unique, and I'll kind of let you share a little bit more about it with the audience. I find this to be really, what are some unique mediums that people might be missing out on in posting content, like especially written form of content that maybe a lot of businesses or individuals are overlooking because we're so focused on like, put the post on LinkedIn, put the post on Facebook, put the post on Instagram, and then, well, there's nowhere else to put the post. But you're a really creative guy. What would you say people are missing out on?
I think building a newsletter and email marketing is obviously nothing new, but I think a lot of people are so social first, top of funnel first, that they forget that even a lot of the leads that they capture through other lead gen sources, they're capturing those emails, they're setting up those calls, they are meeting tons of people on a daily basis where they're getting these emails in a ethical way. And a lot of people are actually interested in, one, the performance of the company, not even from a monetary perspective, but just for how it's progressing over time. And two, they're actually interested in, you know, building their content presence. Or if you run a, you know, the VA company, they're interested in how they can hire domestically, offshore, what those processes look like, whatever that may be. And so if you're already posting on a LinkedIn, or you're already posting on social, or you're already doing a lot of work on your blog, you can very easily see that data, repurpose a lot of that top performing content, and then have that weekly newsletter go out, very low lift, but it be a nurture flow for a lot of the new people that you're already bringing in. And then also, again, keeping you top of mind for like, I might meet someone at an event 2 years ago and we've exchanged a few texts or maybe grabbed a coffee, but they don't know what's going on. But if I'm in their inbox every week, I still, content and third wall are still connected in their head, so that when they're going and having another conversation out and about and someone says, hey, I need a content partner, they're like, oh, I got the guy for you, because you're popping up in their inbox. Also, just posting on a lot of these platforms, whether that's LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, algorithms very unpredictable. You never know when the platform might go down. You never know with, Twitter, like organic reach is throttled. A lot of people are moving the platform. With the email list, you completely own that communication. People's scrolling habits and social media habits might change, especially even, if more people end up going towards more of that digital wellness type stuff. But everyone kind of never really changes their email unless they're, working for a different company and go off that way, and they're always checking it. And so it's a very personal and deep way to kind of build that trust. So the way that I look at it is take a lot of the attention that you get from social and then try to drive it your email and build that trust.
I wonder if email marketing coming into 2025 with how tech is now is eventually going to, not become the norm. Because I myself, for the last 10 years, still utilize email marketing. I call it database reactivation, because you're essentially sitting on a gold mine here of people that are at one point interested, even if it was 4 or 5 years ago, sending them a reminder of who you are and what you offer. Why wouldn't you do that? So I do that very frequently in text outreaches and voicemail blasts. So I think that's very smart. Social media is all that front end marketing. So you cover that very well, but having that backup resource and engaging them with a newsletter to stay on top of mind is genius. I wanted to, bring back up what I said in the beginning, this healthy relationship of technology. What is that? What do you mean? Like, do I just start taking it to dinner and, just put it on the other side, like treating as AI? And what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think it's very different for every person. And the analogy that I draw is it's very similar to and fitness, in the sense that we all know that it's important to go to the gym. It's important to eat well. You're going to feel better. But a lot of people have very different relationships with that. One, in terms of the, type of food they eat, the way that they approach that part of their lives. But also a lot of people don't know where to start with it, right? That's why they hire personal trainers. That's why they use a lot of these apps. They need the education, the accountability, and the support to go and kind of improve this pillar of their lives. And I think our relationships with tech are so similar in the sense that it's so integrated into the way that we work, that we live, and we relax. So it's almost inescapable. And a lot of us, just by kind of like the nature of being a person in 2024, have really kind of built up a dependence for a lot of these devices, and they actually impact us a lot more than we think. And even if it's just like doing your 10-minute scroll break in between meetings, or popping on YouTube for 30 minutes during lunch, when you go and back and you look at that, you're actually pouring a lot of time into these things that might not be serving you, or might be holding you back from achieving what you want to achieve, whether that's in your career, your personal life, or your just broader ambition. And so I'm just fascinated with how these relationships that we have with our devices unfold and how they affect us in the future. And I think what we're seeing is a lot more people are starting to wake up to, one, the fact that they're just pouring a lot of time into these things, but the fact also that they're pouring a lot of time into these things and it's actually not making them feel good. And when you are doing something day after day that you are aware that's not making you feel good, and you continue to go back to it, is that not the definition of a problem? And so that's something that I'm really, really interested in, seeing how people can apply this to their lives, put even small changes in to win back their time, reinvest it into what truly matters. And then also it's a form of well-being. You feel, just good as a person, as a human, the same way that you do.
I just have a comment thing, because I'm sure you want to dive into this more. Yeah, we talk about this a lot on the podcast here about, this is an addiction, whether it's, the small dopamine that you get on watching stupid videos or knowledge-based videos or whatever it may be, or it's an addiction. It's a problem. And I think this is way worse to a laptop, to an iPad, to a TV, because with a TV, you can still be with your family and you're still engaged together with this. Comparatively to this is very solo. It's very aggressive as far as not paying attention to anybody. And when somebody like me, who I have 2 kids, I get caught sometimes where I'm getting, dad, 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 dad. And whether I'm typing out an email, or working, or I've been caught watching a YouTube video that I don't need to watch right now. I need to be with my son. So I've caught myself multiple times doing this. So is there any helpful tips, that you can give us to kind of help cure this fact? Maybe even setting up like rules and regulations, right?
Help us, Randy.
Yeah. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so I actually work backwards from kind of the first principles. There's been, I'm sure you're familiar with this, Shane, you might be as well, like the rocks, pebbles, sand framework in terms of identifying what your true priorities and your values are. So for anyone who's listening who's not familiar, it's basically this thought exercise, and there's actually a visual component with it as well, that if you're trying to fill up a jar, rocks, pebbles, and sand, and you put in the sand first, and then you put in the pebbles, and you put in the rocks, it does not fit. Nothing fits in the jar because the sand fills all of that empty volume. But if you put in the rocks first, then the pebbles, and then the sand fills around all of that matter and everything fits. And so that's an analogy for, your true priorities. So looking back at your values, what are your rocks? In your case, it's your business, it's your family, it's your health. These are the core pillars of you that you cannot function the way that you want to without them. Then you have your pebbles, which might be your, personal side hobby, your personal development, sports league that you play on, watching your favorite team, whatever that may be, still things that are still really important to you. And then you have their sand, which is kind of everything else that when you check off those two boxes, you can fill it in with screen time or watching a movie or, doing whatever it is that you do to relax. And so for a lot of people who feel like they are using their phones too much, I urge them to kind of, one, identify those things if they haven't already, but two, then go and audit their time in terms of where are, you spending the time on the things that light you up, that fill those boxes. So if you say, hey, one of my pebbles or one of my rocks is my personal relationships and friendships, but I used to see my friends for 6 hours a week and now I see them for 2, you can go and very easily look at your Apple screen time or your Google well-being, depending on the phone you have, and see where your time. And so that's a very high level way to be like, all right, I'm spending too much time on these devices. You can go look at the app level as well. And then from there, I have this sheet that I can send you after that I built up called this conscious screen time plan, where you can really take that data, plug it in, see what percentage of your time are you using it as actually a distraction. So I call it like the digital distraction ratio, which is basically the 16 hours of waking time, mostly, that house have a day, the amount of time that you actually are spending distracted by these devices, because ultimately our phone is a tool. We still use it as a tool. And even with certain apps, there might be positive benefits that they use versus, sometimes where we're just scrolling for the hell of it. So how can you kind of track and really be mindful about auditing that distracting time, put it in this ratio to see what percentage of your day is distraction, and then go and tackle that from there. So once you have that baseline and you see, one, these are the things that I'm using, this is where the time's going, and then also being mindful of how it actually makes you feel, right? Like if you accomplish everything that you want to accomplish, you go to bed and you put your head on the pillow and you're like, I did everything that I want to do. And I wanted to carve out an hour of my day to scroll on TikTok because that's what makes you happy. If that's what truly makes you happy and you leave that session feeling better than when you came into it, go crazy. You're crushing it.
Right.
But that's the issue with a lot of people. So it's not only tracking the time that you spend from a distraction standpoint, but it's, do you actually feel good when you're, done with that? And so once you have that, then you can go and start to put in, the distraction blockers, figure out what software tools work, talk about time blocking or different types of tactics. But I think until you kind of diagnose where that time's going, how it's affecting you mentally, how it's affecting your relationships, that's really the first step. But to your point, like with loneliness, it's such a huge issue, or just even distraction. So many working professionals, one, message me, two, I've just read out about their kids actually commenting on their phone use. Like, I think it's one of those things where you kind of need that oh shit inflection moment because we're so deep into it that we don't realize. But for a lot of people, it's having their partner say, hey, like, you're checked out, you're on your phone too much. Having their kids say something like, daddy, why are you on your phone too much? And like, that's that inflection moment in order for them to go and do that. But when you look at the data with kids specifically, like, there's tons of charts that show the amount of time that high schoolers and teens are spending with friends in terms of the frequency in which they see them, and then the amount of time that they spend with them both drop off a cliff after 2010. And it's almost like irrefutable data of,
Right.
this stuff is being introduced into their lives. Play is decreasing. The amount of time they're spending with their friends is decreasing, and the amount of parasocial relationships that they have growing up
Right.
is increasing. And so it's just very, very clear that it's a huge problem, not only for the children, but also for the parents.
That's why the 90s were the best.
Wish I
End
got
of
to
an era.
experience it.
You know,
You're too young, Randy.
it is an interesting thing, because I think part of the conversations that I wind up having is also trying to debunk work-life balance, or even just the work-fun balance. I don't believe in work-life balance or work-fun balance. I believe it should all be integrated. And to your point, Randy, as you're saying, is measurably what makes sense. Like, did you feel good about your day? Did you do everything you needed to do? And did you do everything you wanted to do? It's not about, I worked for 3 hours, I'm going to scroll social media for 3 hours. Sometimes it's, I worked for 5.5 hours and I got to play video games for 30 minutes. And that's a great work-life balance, because you accomplished everything and you got to do the thing that meant like fun and relaxation. And so I'm all about telling people, like, find that balance, find that medium for you, but understand that balance is all relative to scale of importance and fun and everything in between. And of course, make sure that you're responsible with it. Don't just play video games for 6 hours if you're a business owner and you don't have the time for it, or, don't get caught up letting your kid know that you're ignoring them, or your wife or your husband or whoever. And it's very important that people have a way to do this. How do you go about really getting people to committed to the things, like, so they figure out their rocks, their pebbles, their sand? And as a coach, I know the hardest thing to get people to do is follow. What is your methodology, or what's been one of your best maybe tools or processes to get people to commit to? That's where the results.
Yeah, it's the daily accountability portion, and that's like a real core piece of Conzo, is having someone, in this case it's me, following up with you every day, just checking in, saying, "Hey,
Ooh.
how's it going? How's it going? How's it going?" There's apps that can do it with like an automated text. There's a business called Commit Action. Vin, I know you and I were talking about it before. That's purely accountability coaching for entrepreneurs, and I think having that accountability anchor is really important. And that's actually one of the biggest issues with just the digital wellness space as a whole right now. And you have a lot of these screen time blocking apps, whether that's the native Apple screen time, whether that's Opal, Freedom, is that a lot of people either have trouble sticking to them, or they actually find success for a short period of time, but then they turn them off for whatever reason to go answer a message, and then they fall right back into it because it's so addicting, and that pull is so there. And so the issue has actually been building those sustainable long-term habits, and introducing that accountability has actually been the thing, one in my life, but then also in just the people that I've worked with, that I think has been the largest factor. And you're actually seeing it now in a handful of these apps. There's one that I really like, and I also use with my clients, called ClearSpace. And what it does is they have a few cool features where you actually, in order to unlock certain apps, you need to do push-ups, and it monitors how many push-ups that you do and shows what you do it. And so that's cool. But they also have an accountability feature where you can add your friends. You can say like, oh, I only want to go on, Instagram twice a day, and I can see if you went over it, or I'll get a text when you've overdone your screen time limit. And so it
That's
adds
cool.
this, just like, you don't want to go and let this person down, regardless of who that is, whether that's a coach, whether you find some accountability partner on Reddit, which is, a common thing. But yeah, I think that's definitely.
There's one other thing that I'll recommend to you, because I've been recommending it to some of my clients, and I think it is a game changer. I have it myself. It's this thing called Brick. My girl got it for her influencer status, and they reached out to her and they're like, "Hey, we'll send you this product for free. Will you, do a review?" And one day I just picked up my phone and I couldn't use it. I was like, "What the hell? What'd you do to my phone?" She's like, "Nothing." I'm like, "You're full of shit. What did you do?" And I'm calling her out and I'm getting pissed off because I can't do anything and I'm waiting on this, that, and the other thing. And then she shows me, right? And I think the best feature, and I actually really speak very highly of this, I think it's phenomenal. The best feature is to unlock your apps, the things on your phone. You have to physically touch the brick with your phone. So you actually, once you're committed to bricking your phone and locking the apps, will have to go to your space. So I found that one of the biggest benefits, brick your phone before bed, or brick your phone before a heavy work session or whatever it is. So when you wake up in the morning, you literally cannot use your social medias and get caught up. If you're going to work, you literally cannot do crap on your phone until you physically get up and leave the workspace to go and do this. So been a game changer for me. Highly recommend it to anybody who needs that level of accountability because you don't trust yourself.
100%. I also use the brick, and that's probably been the tool that's the most impactful. Just the amount of friction that you need, like you said, in order to touch that physical device. And then especially, I actually live with my phone of all the social media apps like perpetually bricked. Right now, it's actually probably one of the only times where it hasn't been in months. And then I leave my phone, or I leave the brick, on my fridge. So when I'm out and about, I physically cannot get into those apps. I know that I can use them when I'm back on my computer. Being who I am, I tend to have my computer with me, working with me a lot, so I don't need it as much. But even when I travel, there's just no way to get back in, and it provides that clarity. And you almost like lose in the beginning, you'll pick up your phone and touch it just out of nature. But then once you get over that initial hump, you know that there's no way to get back into it. And so you kind of cut that dependency off a lot quicker. And it's funny, I have a site called Digital Detox Tools, which is just a free directory of all of these different tools, software tools, whatever it may be. And some of it's monetized through affiliate, whatever. Brick is actually the one that has sold the most by far, and people really gravitate towards it. And so their ads crush it. The product's great. So it's really cool to see. And it's funny because the product itself is there's not a huge moat around it, in the sense that it's an NFC chip that you can buy off, Alibaba for 20 cents in a 3D printed and with a corresponding, mobile app that's very simple. And so you're seeing a lot of competitors pop up. But what I found is really interesting is that there's actually more than enough space for all of these to kind of coexist, because they're focused on different marketing. And so the brick is very focused on productivity towards that work sense. But I have another one that I don't use as much because I don't really see the need to have both, but it was sent to me, called the 4REM, which is similar, like a little puck, but it's specifically for what you said, Vin, of locking your phone up for sleep. And so that's their marketing. It's all about keeping the phone out of the bedroom, reducing doom scrolling before bed, as opposed to, helping your focus during the workday. So you're seeing a lot of these different ones pop up, but that are each kind of marketed towards different problems that people have, because again, everyone's relationship with this stuff is totally different.
So you go from getting bricked to getting pucked, and then back to bricked, and then your phone's open finally. Dude, I love it. And you, before this, you were talking about a really interesting article you wrote about the long-term impacts of so much screen time. Can you tell the listeners some of the biggest reason that they need to be more accountable and mindful now as opposed to later?
Yeah, totally. So I write a weekly newsletter about this stuff, and I always repost it to Reddit, where there's a big community of people who are interested in digital minimalism, wellness. So I recently wrote a post titled, "We Gotta Stop Joking About the Term Brain Rot Because It's Real." And so if you're not familiar with the term brain rot, you see it all over TikTok comment sections, Instagram. It is what it sounds like. It's content that provides we'll call it mental nutritional value, and more or less rots your brain. And so that word gets thrown around a lot, but I was very curious how much truth there was to it. Is watching this content actually deteriorating the way that your brain develops? And so I was looking into it a bit more, and there was actually a study that was done in the UK last year of like 460,000 people that showed that specifically for TV and computer, spending more than 4 hours a day on television specifically led to early onset dementia, different forms of Alzheimer's, different forms of dementia, just a lot of, and was actually affecting how certain regions of the brain. And so that was very eye-opening to me. With the computer, they didn't have conclusive evidence on it. They needed, like, the jury was still out. It was very hit or miss depending on, what you used your computer for. And with the phone, they hadn't looked at. But what I found really interesting is now more so than ever, our phones are turning into a television, right? Like TikTok is everything is video based. LinkedIn is video based. You go on your ESPN app, you're watching the video. Like everywhere you go, it's essentially an extension of television. And even now, Hollywood and all of the, normal TV shows are reformatting their formats to be into this, more bite-sized short form vertical video form. And so if you can, just extrapolate over from the effects that watching TV did, and now putting it into a more handheld, smaller, omnipresent device, you can only imagine where, those effects will lead down the line. And so I posted some of the findings there on Reddit, and it blew up, really went viral. And a lot of the comments that people were talking about how their focus is completely decimated, whether that's in work or just doing anything. If they can't watch a movie anymore, they need to throw their phone to the other side of the room just to not touch it. Some people are stuck in jobs where they're forced to be in front of the computer all day, and this really scared them because they're stuck there, but they're also not doing anything of real substance within the job. So they're constantly, cycling through Reddit and Twitter and Instagram. And so it really caused a lot of not fear mongering, but just a wake up for a lot of people who are like, wow, I need to be more mindful, especially in the times where I do have control. If I'm in a job where I'm, being forced to be exposed to a lot of it.
I'm curious too, as a few guys over here that have kids, I know one day you'll probably pop one out too, but did you come across anything in that research on screen time in children?
So in that specific one, no, but I'd recommend everyone to read the book, The Anxious Generation. If you haven't heard about it, is guy Jonathan Haidt. He's written a few books in the past. Another one was called The Great Coddling of the American Mind, which was more about how parents kind of over suffocate children and don't allow them to go play and do a lot of the things that they did as kids, which stunt their developmental growth and kind of push them into more of these online worlds. But The Anxious Generation specifically looks at how social media and the kind of deterioration of that play-based generation really affect the way that kids grow up and develop. And it's just completely conclusive, eye-opening evidence on every page where you're just like, oh shit, this is bad, and I should try to do something about that. So that's something that's very much so top of mind, and would highly recommend. Even going on their website, you can see a lot of the facts and figures and stuff like that, and kind of do a SparkNotes version, but still get the wow moments.
Yeah, I feel like, especially with kids, I can't tell you how many times, especially now, I go to restaurants and I see kids just iPhones, phones, whatever it may be, because the parents want peace and quiet. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? Why is this turning into something? This was never a thing back in the day. It was always family dinners, enjoying each other, having conversations. And now, your kid's acting up, so you put an iPad in front of us so you can have some peace and quiet. It's teach him, teach her, teach this person how to behave in public or at your home or whatever it may be. And it's giving up because this is it. This is the solution. It's well, what's that going to do? I guess it's the same thing for us too. So, it's a double-edged sword. I love what you do. I definitely feel that, I want to kind of follow your journey and find out more, especially because it's probably the worst drug out there. I mean, it's a relationship ruiner. It's this dopamine that's fake dopamine that shouldn't be there. And it
Yep.
ruins all of us. It really does. And it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, I think we'll start to see more people kind of wake up to it, in the sense that it'll, I suspect, be something kind of like the way that we approach cigarettes, where, 30 years down the line, you're like, oh my God, how could we have, teens or adults smoking a pack a day and doctors not even blinking an eye? And you're starting to see that now from a government level, where the Surgeon General is asking for warning labels on social media, which I honestly don't think is going to do much, but I do think that it's important to just inject that into the conversation as far as making people aware of it. But I think you're going to start to see more data. Yeah, for sure. That's what it is, especially for the age limit. And then there's the Kids Online Safety Act, which is working on getting passed, make a lot of these platforms a lot more susceptible, or a lot more useful for children, and not as susceptible to a lot of the downfalls that come with it. But a lot of people still aren't focusing on the adults, who I still think are very much so affected. And I'm more focused about, how the kids, when they go and they become adults, parents, legislators, educators, entrepreneurs, how do they survive? Because I had the luxury of kind of growing up on the precipice of it. So I still had some of my life not fully consumed by social media, but I can only imagine how, my friends' younger siblings and my friends' children are going to go, and who are now, with AI and deepfakes and even outsourcing critical thinking. I'm very guilty of using ChatGPT, and this kind of even ties back to the content stuff too, but using ChatGPT to answer certain questions or to go and search for things when I know the answer, or I might be able to go think about the answer, but it's very easy to just pop up ChatGPT or Perplexity and kind of go and do that. So we're trading depth for speed. And I actually wrote that in that post. That was a part of that. But as someone who is so digitally native to it, I can't even imagine how that continues to compound as you get older and need to actually become a person and do things and take on responsibility.
It's a good point. I mean, critical thinking might go out the window at that point. I love that. It's essentially just the speed aspect of it. I'm definitely guilty of that as well. I was writing a review for a friend, and I said, you know what? I'm going to sum the text up of what I want to put. Give me a good reply for this, and it was a great reply.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean,
It's
I use ChatGPT way too much, but it's are you trading time for some of that cognitive load? But yeah, it's really interesting.
See, that's why I don't use Chat GPT. You youngsters, you rapscallions. I and will always be sharper than both of you
I'm older
because
than you.
I think. Well,
I'm older than you. You
doesn't
can't say
matter.
that.
Doesn't matter. You're embracing crap like you're 12.
I
Grow
have
up.
to embrace it. My
And see,
company is
that's a fallacy right there. Coach this man, somebody, because I'm not doing it.
you're fired, Ben.
Thank God. Anyway, Randy, can you go ahead and tell us? We're getting towards the end here, and we always love to ask this of all of our guests because the precipice, where the whole point of our podcast is that to be a one percenter, it does not mean you have to be a billionaire. It just means that you're somebody who's striving to be extraordinary in something that you really care about and that you're passionate about. So for you, my friend, what do you believe? What is your version of a 1%?
Yeah, I think it's actually flipping the 1% to a different frame of just the getting 1% better every day. So I have that compounding chart of watching what the compound chart does if you get 1% better every day versus what you do if you get 1% worse. And I've stared at that literally multiple times a day, every day for the last 5 years. And so whether I'm approaching the gym, whether I'm approaching my work, building relationships, that's something that I always strive for. Again, doesn't need to be perfect, but I think that if you go and you do that over a long enough time horizon, you will naturally fall into what that 1% life looks like. For me, it's been what we, talk about a lot in terms of those 4 freedoms and being able to have, the freedom in who I spend my time with, where I spend my time, what I do, what the purpose is. And so I'm constantly in the getting 1% better every day, striving to achieve those 4 freedoms, which I think kind of encapsulate that one.
I love it. The man who will be 1% better every day and have all the freedom in the world to do it. Randy, last thing before we let you go, how do people get in touch with you? How do they get involved if they want the coaching? How do people seek you out if they need that enhancement to their copy and their marketing? Let people know where they could get in touch.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm posting there every day. A lot of content on both things that we just covered. You can also shoot me an email, randy@thirdwallcreative.com. You'll see Third Wall on the LinkedIn. You'll see Konzo on the LinkedIn as well. You can reach out, book a call directly for either of those straight from the site. And yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with anyone who's listening and wants to chat more about either.
Do you have, I think you said you have a newsletter, right? So how could people get like a free resource from, I assume the newsletter is not paid, right? You have a free resource people could grab from you?
Yeah, newsletter is not paid. So newsletter for the digital wellness stuff is called The Reboot. You can get it at readreboot.com. And also on the Conso site, there's a free 5-day email course that kind of walks you through how to put a lot of the things that we talked about with the rocks and pebbles, auditing the time, starting some journaling prompts. All of that is directly in the free email courses. So there's a lot of info that you can get by email. And then if you sign up for the email through the Third Wall site, we do like a monthly update there.
I love it. People, do not miss out on getting value from both of his business. That's 2 resources for the price of nothing. And as I always like to say, if it's free, it's for me. So embrace that mantra. Go get his stuff. Yeah, Shane loves it too. And
Listen,
Randy,
good one.
is it really? Oh,
Yeah.
dude, I've been living by that. It makes my life great. So, Randy, thank you for sorry, we had you here today, not us. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciated having you, man. It's such a pleasure. Really, stay tuned for a minute afterwards. And as always, everybody, make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you're thinking. How was the episode? How much do you love Randy? How much do you love Shane? How much do you love me? Please let us know whatever you want. And as always, I'm Vin, and
all right, it's pointing down as Randy to me. So, and I'm Shane.
oh crap. Damn it. All right. Well, you're down on my screen. I'm Vin. That's Shane. That's Randy. Thanks for being here, everybody. I'll see you soon.
Okay.